The stars looked different when you were the last one left to see them. Taman floated in the silence of his dying ship, watching the fuel gauge blink red warnings that no longer mattered. 3 years ago, there had been millions of humans scattered across 12 colony worlds. 2 years ago, there had been thousands hiding in the asteroid belts. 1 year ago, there had been hundreds running for their lives through the outer rim. Now there was just him. His ship groaned as another system failed. The cooling units had given up an hour ago, and sweat dripped down his face in the cramped cockpit. Outside the cracked viewport, the Shroud Nebula painted space in colors of purple and blue, beautiful and deadly. Somewhere in that cosmic fog was a derelict station that might have fuel cells, might have food, might have anything that could keep him alive another week. Taman knew it was pointless. He had known for months. But humans were stubborn creatures, and even the last one could not quite let go of hope. The neural implant behind his ear hummed softly, a constant reminder of what he carried. Every book humanity had ever written, every song ever sung, every scientific discovery, every poem, every stupid joke and profound truth, the entire species reduced to electrical signals in his brain, waiting for someone to remember them. He guided his ship toward the station's coordinates, using manual controls because the navigation computer had fried last month. The nebula's radiation played havoc with his sensors, turning his screen into a mess of static and false readings. He almost missed the other ships until they were right on top of him. 3 vessels, sleek and predatory, erupted from the nebula's fog. Taman's blood turned cold. He recognized the design. Draktheran hunters, the Empire's enforcement fleet. They were not supposed to be this far out in the dead zones. No one came here anymore. There was nothing left to conquer. The lead ship fired a warning shot that vaporized what remained of his port thruster. Taman's ship spun wildly, alarms screaming in 3 different languages. He wrestled with the controls trying to compensate, but physics was not kind to dying vessels piloted by desperate men. The hunters did not fire again. They wanted him alive. Taman made a choice then. Not to surrender, but to fall with purpose. He cut his remaining engines and dove straight into the nebula's deepest region, where the radiation was thick enough to melt hull plating. The hunters followed, confident in their superior shielding. They should not have been so confident. Taman flew like a madman, threading his ship through fields of ionized gas that cooked his already failing systems. Behind him, the hunters struggled to match his reckless trajectory. He learned to fly, in the cargo lanes, dodging debris and pirates, learning every dirty trick that kept cheap ships running when they should have fallen apart. The Empire's pilots flew with precision and training. Taman flew with desperation and spite. One of the hunters clipped a gas cloud, and its shields flared bright, before exploding in a ball of superheated plasma. The other 2 hesitated just long enough for Taman to gain distance. He aimed for a gravitational anomaly at the nebula's edge, a whirlpool in space that had destroyed better ships than his. He almost made it. The second hunter's tractor beam caught his ship just as he reached the anomaly's pull. For a terrible moment, Taman was caught between 2 impossible forces. Metal screamed. Rivets popped. The hull cracked like an eggshell. Then everything tore apart at once. Taman remembered falling. He remembered the emergency pod ejecting, spinning through space as his ship disintegrated behind him. He remembered the hunters trying to follow, getting caught in the anomaly's grip, their ships crushed like paper in a fist. He remembered the gravitational slingshot that hurled his pod across space at speeds that should have liquefied his organs. And then he remembered nothing at all. When consciousness returned, it came with pain. Every nerve in Taman's body felt like it had been set on fire, and then frozen solid. He was lying on metal, cold and unyielding. His hands were bound behind his back with energy cuffs that hummed against his wrists. He opened his eyes slowly, expecting a prison cell or an interrogation room. Instead, he saw beauty that took his breath away. The chamber was enormous, carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light. Pillars rose like ancient trees, covered in symbols from a dozen different species. The ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into shadow, and everywhere, absolutely everywhere, were seats, thousands of them, arranged in circular tiers that climbed toward the darkness above. They were filled with beings of every imaginable shape and size, creatures with scales, with fur, with crystalline bodies that refracted light into rainbows. Six-limbed giants sat beside floating spheres of pure energy. Things with too many eyes watched him with expressions he could not read. This was not a prison. This was a coliseum. Taman lay at its center, on a platform of dark metal that reflected the lights above like a mirror. Around him, the floor was stained with colors he tried not to think about. Old blood from old battles. Species he would never know. A voice echoed through the vast space, amplified by technology he could not see. It spoke in a language that slithered through the air like smoke, but his neural implant translated automatically. The human survived the fall. How unexpected. Taman turned his head toward the voice and felt his remaining hope die. She sat on a throne of black crystal at the chamber's edge, elevated above the common seats. Her body was serpentine, covered in scales that shifted between green and gold in the light. 4 arms rested on the throne's armrests, each hand bearing 3 fingers tipped with claws that could tear through steel. Her face was almost human, if humans had vertical pupils and fangs that showed when they smiled. She wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid shadow, and on her head sat a circlet of dark metal that marked her as someone important, someone dangerous. "I am Hyejin," she said, and her voice carried absolute authority. "High Arbiter of the Draktheron Council. I speak with the voice of the 12 apex species that rule this galaxy." She leaned forward, studying him with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "And you are the last human, the final remnant of a species that thought it could claim the stars." Taman said nothing. What could he say? Hyejin stood, and the crowd fell silent. Every being in that vast space watched her, waited for her words. She descended from her throne with fluid grace, walking across the platform until she stood over Taman's broken body. "Your species is dead," she said, not cruelly, but a simple fact. "Your worlds are ash. Your ships are scrap. Your culture is forgotten." She tilted her head, studying him like a scientist might study an interesting insect. "You have no home, no allies, no future. By all rights, you should not exist." She reached down with one clawed hand and lifted his chin, forcing him to meet her alien eyes. "I offer you a choice, human. You may die here now with whatever dignity your kind possessed. A quick death. A merciful death." She released him and stepped back. "Or you may fight in the trials of ascension. You will face warriors from species far superior to your own. You will suffer. You will bleed. And you will die anyway, but slowly for the entertainment of your betters." The crowd stirred, excited by the prospect. Hyejin smiled, showing far too many teeth. "Choose." Taman looked at her, then at the thousands of beings watching him. He thought of Earth, burning in the void. He thought of everyone he had loved, everyone he had failed to save. He thought of the weight in his head, the entire history of his species waiting to be forgotten. Then he smiled back at her, bloody and broken and entirely unafraid. "I choose to fight," he said. "Not to live, but to make you remember us." The crowd erupted in laughter and jeers. But Hyejin did not laugh. She stared at him with something that might have been curiosity, or might have been the first stirring of doubt. "Very well," she said, "let the trials begin." They threw Taman into a cell beneath the Colosseum and left him to contemplate his death. The room was small, carved from the same black stone as everything else in this place. A narrow bench served as a bed. A hole in the corner served purposes he preferred not to think about. The only light came from strips of bioluminescent fungus growing in the cracks, casting everything in sickly green. He was not alone in the darkness below. Through the walls he heard others, breathing that was too fast or too slow to be human, scraping sounds of claws on stone, once a scream that ended too quickly. His body hurt everywhere. The fall through space had cracked ribs, torn muscles, left bruises that painted his skin in purple and black. Without medical treatment, he would be lucky to walk, let alone fight. But the Empire did not care about fairness. They wanted a show. On his second day in the cell, they brought food. A guard opened a slot in the door and shoved through a bowl of gray paste that smelled like rotting fish. Taman ate it anyway, forcing down every disgusting mouthful. Pride would not keep him alive, but calories might. On his third day, the neural implant behind his ear activated on its own. At first, Taman thought it was malfunctioning, damaged by the crash. Then he realized what was happening. The implant was searching through humanity's stored knowledge, pulling up files he had not accessed in years. Combat training manuals from Earth's military archives, survival guides from the colony pioneers, historical records of human warriors who had faced impossible odds. The implant was trying to help him, feeding him everything humanity had learned about fighting and surviving. Taman spent hours absorbing the information, letting it flow into his consciousness. He learned about ancient gladiators who fought in arenas not so different from this one. He learned about soldiers who turned disadvantages into weapons. He learned that humans had always been weak compared to other predators on their own world, and they had survived by being clever, adaptable, and too stubborn to accept defeat. On the fourth day, they came for him. The guards were Vethrak like Hejan, but larger, built for violence rather than politics. They hauled him from the cell without gentleness, dragging him through tunnels lit by the same diseased light. Other cells lined the passage, and from some of them, eyes watched him pass. Not all of them were hostile. Some looked curious. Others looked pitying. They brought him to an armory, a room filled with weapons from 100 different worlds. Swords, spears, energy weapons, projectile guns, things he could not name. A technician, some species with too many fingers and not enough face, gestured at the racks. "Choose," it said in a voice like grinding metal. Taman walked slowly through the room, studying each weapon. His hands were free now, though guards watched his every movement. He picked up an energy blade, felt its weight, put it down, lifted a projectile rifle, checked its mechanisms, set it aside. The technician made an impatient sound. "Hurry, human." The crowd waits. Taman ignored it. He was thinking about what made humans different. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most durable, but they were tool users, problem solvers, survivors who adapted to every environment their world had thrown at them. He chose a simple combat knife, short and balanced, a coil of high tensile wire, a small energy cell meant for emergency repairs, and a torn piece of metal plating that he could use as a shield or a blade. The technician stared at his choices. "These are scraps. You will die in seconds." "Probably," Taman agreed, and followed the guards toward the arena. The roar hit him before he saw the crowd. It was a physical thing, a wall of sound that pressed against his chest and made his ears ring. Then the gate opened, and he stepped into the Crimson Coliseum for the second time. Daylight blinded him after days in darkness. When his vision cleared, he saw them, thousands upon thousands of beings, all watching him, all waiting to see him torn apart. The platform had changed. Now it was a battlefield, scattered with obstacles and hazards. Energy barriers flickered in random patterns. Gravity wells created zones where up and down lost meaning. Automated turrets tracked movement from hidden positions. On the opposite side of the platform, another gate opened. Daehyun emerged, and Taman's breath caught in his throat. The Kelthros warrior stood 8 feet tall on 4 powerful legs. His body was covered in chitinous armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. 6 arms sprouted from his torso, each one holding a curved blade that dripped with something Taman hoped was not poison. His head was insectoid, dominated by compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. Daehyun had been a champion of his people before the Draktheran Empire crushed their civilization. Now he fought in their arena, earning his survival one death at a time. A voice boomed across the Colosseum, Hejan, speaking from her throne high above. The human face is Daehyun of the Kelthros, survivor of 43 trials. This battle ends when one fighter cannot continue, or when one fighter is dead. There are no other rules. The crowd erupted in cheers and shouts in a dozen languages. "Begin." Daehyun moved like lightning given form. He crossed the platform in seconds, all 6 blades singing through the air in a pattern that would have carved Taman into pieces. But Taman was already moving. He had studied the platform while Daehyun entered, mapped the obstacles, planned his response. He rolled behind an energy barrier just as the blades reached him, and Daehyun's weapon sparked against the shield. The Kelthros warrior was fast, but Taman was learning. He dodged between obstacles, using the terrain to break line of sight, forcing Daehyun to adjust his attacks. Every time the warrior committed to a strike, Taemin was somewhere else. The crowd's cheers turned confused. This was not the quick slaughter they had expected. Daehyun changed tactics. He used his forelegs to climb a pillar, gaining the high ground. From above, he could strike downward using gravity to add force to his blows. It was brilliant strategy. Taemin watched him climb and smiled, because Daehyun had just made a mistake. He had assumed the human would fight like other species, relying on strength and direct confrontation. While Daehyun positioned himself, Taemin worked quickly. He used his wire to create a tripline between two obstacles, nearly invisible in the harsh light. He planted his energy cell near a gravity well and rigged it to overload. He positioned his metal shield to reflect light in specific directions. Then he waited. Daehyun launched himself from the pillar, all 6 blades aimed at Taemin's position. It was a killing strike, impossible to dodge. Taemin did not try to dodge. He activated the energy cell. The explosion was small but perfectly timed. It destabilized the gravity well, creating a surge that caught Daehyun mid-leap and flung him sideways. The warrior's trajectory shifted just enough that he missed Taemin entirely and slammed into the pillar behind him. Daehyun recovered instantly, but now he was off balance, confused. He charged again, and this time his legs caught the wire. He stumbled just for a moment. That moment was enough. Taemin had positioned the shield to reflect focused light directly into Daehyun's compound eyes. Blinded, the warrior swung wildly, hitting nothing. Taemin moved in close, too close for the long blades to be effective, and drove his combat knife into the joint where 2 of Daehyun's arms connected to his torso. The blade bit deep. Daehyun's arm went limp, the blade falling from nerveless fingers. The warrior roared and tried to grab Taemin with his remaining arms, but Taemin was already gone, rolling away, putting distance between them. Daehyun was stronger, faster, better armed, but he was also bleeding now, one arm useless, his legendary precision compromised. They circled each other, both breathing hard. The crowd had gone completely silent. Daehyun spoke for the first time, his voice translated by technology. "You fight with deception." "I fight to win," Taemin replied. "There is no honor in tricks." Taemin laughed, sharp and bitter. "Honor is for people who have the luxury of strength. I'm just trying not to die." They clashed again and again, each exchange wearing them both down. Daehyun's blades found flesh, opening cuts on Taemin's arms and legs. But Taemin's knife found joints, tendons, the weak points in chitinous armor. It was a war of attrition, and both warriors knew how it would end. Finally, Daehyun stumbled, his legs giving out from blood loss and exhaustion. He fell to one knee, unable to continue. Taemin stood over him, knife raised. The crowd was screaming now, demanding death. That was the show they had paid for. But Taemin looked at Daehyun and saw something he recognized. Another survivor, another warrior fighting not because he wanted to, but because the Empire had given him no choice. He lowered the knife. "Stay down," he said quietly. Daehyun's compound eyes studied him with an expression Taemin could not read. Then the Kelthros warrior nodded once and did not rise. The crowd's screams turned to confusion, then anger. Mercy was not part of the script. But Heejin's voice cut through the noise. "The human is victorious. Daehyun lives by his mercy." Taemin looked up at her throne and saw her watching him with those alien eyes. She was not angry. She was thinking. And thinking, Taemin realized, might be more dangerous than any blade. Guards came to take him back to his cell. As they led him away, he heard the crowd still arguing, still confused by what they had witnessed. Good. Confusion was the first step toward doubt. And doubt was the crack in every Empire's armor. Word spread through the Colosseum's depths like fire through dry grass. The human had shown mercy. In an empire built on dominance and survival of the strongest, where weakness meant death and compassion was suicide, the last human had done the unthinkable. He had chosen not to kill. Taemin lay on his cell's narrow bench, trying to ignore the pain from a dozen cuts and bruises. His victory had earned him better food, actual medical supplies, and something more valuable than either. Attention. They came in the night, voices whispering through the walls. "Human," someone hissed from the next cell. "Can you hear me?" Taemin sat up slowly. "I hear you. I am Bora, Shikar people. I saw your fight." The voice was feminine, tinged with an accent his implant struggled to translate. "Why did you spare the Kelthros?" He was beaten. Killing him would have been murder, not combat. Silence stretched between them. Then Bora laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Murder is all we do here, human. That is the point. The Empire teaches conquered species to kill each other so we forget who conquered us in the first place. Another voice joined from across the passage, deeper, mechanical. She speaks truth. I am Minho. My people, the Quellan, built ships that danced between stars. Now I fight for scraps and the crowd's amusement. More voices emerged from the darkness. Jiwan, a luminary whose psychic gifts had not saved her people from extinction. Hyunwoo, a Corvan whose species once ruled 3 systems. Dozens of others, all survivors, all prisoners, all watching to see what the human would do next. Why do you fight? Taman asked the darkness. Because the alternative is immediate execution, Bora replied. At least in the arena we can pretend we have some control over our deaths. Do you want to die? Want? Minho's voice carried bitter amusement. None of us want to die, human. But the Empire has taught us we are inferior, that our defeat was inevitable, that resistance is pointless. After enough years, enough losses, you start to believe it. Taman stood despite his body's protests and pressed his face against the narrow gap between door and wall. What if they were lying? What? The Empire. What if they lied? What if your defeat was not about strength or superiority? What if they won because they were more ruthless, not more worthy? Silence answered him, heavy with things unspoken. Finally, Jiwan spoke, her voice like music played on broken instruments. I can feel emotions, human. Right now I feel yours. You actually believe what you're saying. After everything they did to your species, you still have hope. Hope is all I have left, Taman admitted. That and spite. Bora laughed again. Spite, I understand. Tell me, human with hope and spite, what would you do if you could? I would make them remember that every species they conquered was worth remembering. I would show them that strength without mercy is just brutality with a crown. Pretty words, Minho said, but we face the next trial in 3 days. Pretty words will not stop the blades. Then we need to be smarter than the blades. We, if you'll have me. The darkness pondered his offer. Then Bora spoke with decision in her voice. The next trial is survival. They drop us in an environment designed to kill us, fill it with traps and horrors, and see who emerges. Usually contestants work alone, but if we work together, the Empire would call it cheating, Hyunwoo warned. The Empire said there were no rules, Taman countered. Cooperation is not against the rules. It's just something they never considered. Over the following days, they planned. The cells were monitored, but not perfectly. Guards grew bored with their duties. Surveillance focused on physical actions, not whispered strategies. Through the walls and in brief moments when they were moved between locations, the prisoners shared information. Bora had fought in 3 trials and knew how the arena's environments worked. Minho understood the technology that powered the traps. Jiwan could sense living things through walls, could feel where dangers lurked. Together, they became something the Empire had never expected. They became a team. But not everyone in the Colosseum's depths approved of Taman's survival. On the evening before the trial, 4 guards came to his cell. They were not the usual escorts. These moved with purpose and their weapons were drawn. The human has disrupted the natural order, their leader said, a massive creature covered in rocky plates. The God Emperor himself has noticed you. This cannot be allowed to continue. Taman backed against the far wall, knowing he was trapped. 4 armed guards in a locked cell. No weapons, no escape. This was not a trial he could win. The lead guard raised his weapon, and Taman closed his eyes, thinking of Earth. Of everyone he had failed. The weapon fired, but the shot never reached him. Daehyun stood in the doorway, moving faster than Taman's eyes could follow. The Kelthros warrior had thrown himself between Taman and the blast, taking the hit meant for the human. His chitinous armor cracked but held. The human spared my life in the arena, Daehyun said, his multiple arms spreading in challenge. He showed me honor when I had forgotten what honor meant. I will not watch him murdered by cowards who hide behind duty. The guards stared at him in shock. Daehyun was a champion, a survivor, someone they could not simply execute without consequences. More importantly, his cell door was open and he was standing between them and their target. Stand aside, Kelthros, or share his fate. I choose to stand. For a long moment, violence hung in the air like a held breath. Then footsteps echoed down the corridor, measured and deliberate. Everyone turned to watch as Hyejin emerged from the shadows, her forearms folded, her expression unreadable. Explain, she commanded. The lead guard shifted nervously. High Arbiter. We were ensuring security. By murdering a contestant the night before a trial? How fascinating. Her voice dripped with dangerous politeness. Did the God Emperor order this personally? No, High Arbiter. We acted on our own initiative. I see. Hyejin glided past them to examine Taemin, her vertical pupils studying him like a puzzle she could not quite solve. You have caused quite a disturbance, human. My guards attempt assassination. A former champion defends you. Prisoners whisper your name in the darkness. Tell me, what are you planning? To survive, Taemin said honestly, and to make survival mean something. Cryptic. She turned to the guards. Leave, all of you. If I discover anyone else attempting to interfere with the trials, I will personally oversee their execution. The trials are sacred. They will proceed as designed. The guards fled. Daehyun hesitated, then bowed to Hyejin and returned to his cell. Only the Arbiter and the human remained. Walk with me, Hyejin commanded. It was not a request. Taemin followed her through the tunnels, past cells filled with watching eyes until they reached a chamber he had not seen before. It was small and furnished with startling luxury. Cushions, actual furniture, even plants growing in pots of rich soil. This is my meditation space, Hyejin explained. I come here when the weight of empire becomes tedious. She settled onto a cushion with fluid grace and gestured for him to sit. I have presided over these trials for 500 years. In that time, I have seen thousands of contestants. Warriors, leaders, survivors. All of them fought to live. But you, human, you fight for something else. What is it? Taemin considered lying, then decided truth might be more dangerous. I fight to prove that my species mattered, that we were worth remembering. Your species is dead. Then I fight to prove that we died defiant, not defeated. Hyejin was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice carried something he had not heard before. Doubt. My people, the Vethrak, joined the Draktheran Empire 3,000 years ago. We were conquerors before we were conquered, and we adapted by becoming the Empire's administrators. We learned that survival meant accepting the hierarchy. The strong rule. The weak serve or die. This is the natural order. Natural according to who? According to reality. Species that cannot compete for resources go extinct. This is not cruelty. This is simply how the universe functions. Is it? Taemin leaned forward despite his exhaustion. Or is it just what the Empire tells conquered species so they accept their place? My people had a saying, history is written by the victors. But that does not make their version true. It just makes it the only version anyone hears. Your species thought differently, and where did that lead? To extinction. Maybe, or maybe we just lost a battle, not the war. Ideas do not die when people do. They survive in stories and memory, and anyone who hears them and thinks, what if? You are thinking it right now. I can see it in your eyes. Hyejin stood abruptly. You are a clever speaker, human. But words will not save you in tomorrow's trial. The environment we have prepared is designed to kill even the strongest warriors. You, injured and alone, will not last an hour. Then I guess I better not be alone. She stared at him, understanding dawning. You have been organizing the other prisoners. I have been talking to them. There is a difference, not to the Empire. But she did not sound angry. She sounded almost curious. Very well. I will watch your cooperation with interest. If you survive, perhaps we will speak again. She led him back to his cell. Before the door closed, she spoke one last time. My mentor once told me that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is not a weapon or an army. It is an idea whose time has come. Sleep well, human. Tomorrow you will face death. I find myself oddly invested in seeing how you respond. The door sealed, leaving Taemin in darkness. But through the walls he heard Bora's voice and Minho's and Jiwon's. He heard hope taking root in the strangest soil, growing in the last place the Empire expected. Tomorrow they would face the trial together. And together, they might just prove that cooperation was stronger than domination. It was a small hope. A fragile hope. But it was enough. The fourth trial began at dawn, though dawn meant nothing in the artificial sky above the Colosseum. The platform had transformed overnight into something nightmarish. Where once there had been a simple arena, now there rose a twisted landscape of metal and stone, layered with technology that bent physics into impossible shapes. Gravity shifted in random zones, making up and down meaningless concepts. Walls appeared and disappeared as holographic projectors activated and deactivated on unpredictable timers. The floor was pockmarked with vents that spewed superheated steam or flash froze everything within 10 meters. And somewhere in that deadly maze, automated defense systems waited to turn contestants into scattered atoms. 30 warriors entered. The trial would continue until only 5 remained. Taemin stood at one entrance with Bora beside him. The Shikar was lean and covered in tawny fur, with eyes that could track a falling leaf in a hurricane. Her 4-fingered hands flexed nervously, claws extending and retracting. Minho enters from the east, she whispered. Jiwon from the south. Hyunwoo and 3 others agreed to cooperate. They are scattered at the other gates. And the rest? Will try to kill us immediately. Bora showed her fangs in what might have been a smile. Traditional strategy. Eliminate the weak early, save strength for final confrontations. Good thing we are not playing traditionally. The gates opened. The trial began. Immediately chaos erupted. Warriors charged into the maze with weapons drawn, following instincts honed by dozens of previous battles. Some headed toward the center, seeking control of high ground. Others lurked near entrances, ambushing those who entered behind them. Taemin and Bora went up, while others fought for territory. They climbed the shifting walls using Bora's natural agility and Taemin's improvisational tools. The wire he had used in his first trial became climbing rope. The metal plating became handholds hammered into stone. Within minutes, they had reached a ledge 15 meters above the chaos. From there, they could see the whole battlefield. More importantly, Jiwon could reach them. The luminary appeared from behind a holographic wall, moving with careful precision. She was small, barely reaching Taemin's shoulder, with translucent skin that glowed faintly with internal light. Her people had been pacifist before the Empire found them, using their psychic gifts for healing rather than harm. 3 contestants are already dead, she reported, her voice barely audible over the screaming below. 2 killed by other warriors, 1 by a defense turret. The survivors are splitting into hunters and hunted. Where is Minho? Trapped in a gravity well near the eastern quadrant. I can feel his distress but cannot reach him through the maze. Taemin studied the battlefield, his neural implant pulling up tactical information, running probabilities. Below, a massive warrior from a species he did not recognize was crushing opponents with brute strength. Another contestant covered in energy shields methodically eliminated anyone who came near. Traditional tactics. Traditional thinking. Bora, can you reach Minho's position? If I can avoid the 3 hunters between here and there, yes. Then go. Get him out and bring him back to this position. We need his technical skills. And you? I am going to break their toys. Jiwon grabbed his arm with surprising strength. I can feel your intention, human. It is suicidal. Most of my intentions are. He smiled at her worried expression. Trust me, I have been disappointing people who bet against me my entire life. Bora leaped from the ledge, vanishing into the maze below with feline grace. Taemin turned his attention to the nearest defense turret, a massive weapon mounted on a swiveling base that tracked movement with cold, mechanical precision. The turrets were the trial's real threat. Warriors could be avoided, outthought, maybe even reasoned with, but the automated systems killed without hesitation, following programming older than most species in the Empire. Taemin's implant had been studying them since the trial began, analyzing firing patterns, tracking routines, mapping blind spots. Now it fed him a plan so ridiculous he almost laughed. Almost. He climbed down from the ledge, deliberately entering the turret's view. Immediately it locked onto him, weapons charging. Taemin ran, counting seconds, measuring distances. The turret fired. Taemin dove behind a wall just as the blast tore through where he had been standing. The wall's holographic projector exploded, sparking and smoking. Perfect. He moved to the next turret, then the next, repeating the pattern. Bait dodge let the turrets destroy their own infrastructure. Each destroyed projector made the maze less deadly, more predictable, and each explosion drew attention. Warriors began to notice the human running through the battlefield like a madman. Some tried to kill him, seeing easy prey, but Taemin had mapped the turret's firing zones. He led pursuers into kill boxes and let the automated defenses do his work for him. Others were not so foolish. They watched and learned, following his path, using the cleared zones to their advantage. Exactly as he had planned. By the time Bora returned with Minho, the battlefield had transformed. Half the turrets were destroyed or damaged. The holographic maze was failing, revealing the real structure beneath. And instead of 30 independent warriors trying to kill each other, something new was emerging. Cooperation. It started small. Two warriors from different species realizing they could not cross a gravity well alone, but could together. A group of three sharing information about trap locations. Hyunwoo organizing a coordinated assault on a particularly deadly turret. The crowd above noticed. Their cheers turned uncertain. This was not how trials were supposed to proceed. Minho reached the ledge, breathing hard. The Quellan was compact and muscular, with forearms that could manipulate tools with incredible precision. You are either brilliant or insane, human. Can't I be both? Fair point. Minho studied the battlefield below. What do you need? Can you hack the defense systems? Given time, possibly, but the encryption is Imperial military grade. You do not need to hack them completely. Just confuse them. Make them target each other instead of contestants. Minho's four eyes widened. Then he laughed, a sound like bells. That might actually work. I need 30 minutes and a direct access point. I will get you to one. Jiwon, can you sense where the other cooperative groups are? The Luminari closed her eyes, her skin brightening. Yes, I feel hope. It is strange. In all my time here, I have never felt hope in the arena before. Then let's give them more of it. What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was more like a dance, a complex choreography of survival where every participant played their part. Bora scouted paths and warned of dangers. Jiwon coordinated groups through psychic impressions, letting them know where allies were. Hyunwoo used his size to shield smaller warriors from turret fire, and Minho, protected by a dozen volunteers, worked on the access panel of a defense hub, his forearms moving faster than human eyes could follow. The remaining hunters, the warriors who refused to cooperate, found themselves isolated. The automated systems could not distinguish between contestant and contestant, but they could identify weapons fire, and when a hunter attacked, every nearby turret would respond to the threat. One by one, the hunters fell. Not all to turrets. Some realized too late that they were outnumbered by warriors who had learned to work together. Taemin did not watch those moments. He had started this cooperation to survive, but he knew what it meant. In helping others live, he was still choosing who would die. After 28 minutes, Minho succeeded. I cannot shut them down, he called out, but I can reprogram their target priorities. The turrets will now focus on the most heavily armed targets first, which meant the hunters. The battlefield erupted into chaos as turrets swiveled toward warriors carrying the biggest weapons. Those who had relied on firepower to dominate. Some tried to drop their weapons and run. Others tried to fight back, firing at the turrets, which only made them bigger targets. It was over in minutes. 15 warriors remained standing, more than the trial required. They looked at each other, weapons lowered, uncertain what happened next. Hijin's voice boomed across the Colosseum. The trial is complete. By surviving, you have all earned progression. The crowd exploded in arguments. This was not protocol. Trials were supposed to produce 5 survivors, not 15. But the rules only stated that the trial ended when 5 or fewer remained capable of fighting. Technically, there were only 5 groups, each working together. Technically, it was legal. The warriors were led from the maze back toward the cells. But something had changed. They walked together now, talking, comparing experiences. The barriers between species felt less absolute. Guards separated them at the cells, but whispers continued through walls. What they had done in the trial, they could do again. Together, they were stronger than apart. That night, Hijin came to Taemin's cell again. You have caused significant disruption, she said without preamble. The God Emperor himself has summoned me to explain why 15 contestants survived a trial designed for 5. What did you tell him? That they followed the rules precisely, just not in the spirit those rules were intended. She settled against the wall, her serpentine grace making even the bare cell seem elegant. He was not pleased. I imagine not. You are teaching conquered species to cooperate, to see beyond their assigned roles in the Empire's hierarchy. Do you understand what that means? It means the Empire has to work harder to keep us divided. It means you are dangerous. But she did not sound angry. She sounded thoughtful. Tell me, human, what did your species believe about power? Taemin considered the question carefully. We believed that real power came not from domination, but from the freely given cooperation of equals. A king is only powerful if people choose to follow. A tyrant is only powerful until people choose to resist. And if the tyrant is strong enough to crush resistance, then they have not power, only force. And force breaks when pressure grows too great. Hyejin was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. 500 years I have served this empire. I have watched species fall, watched cultures die, watched the strong triumph over the weak. I believed it was natural, inevitable, the way things must be. And now? Now I watch a human, the weakest species I have ever encountered, teach warriors to cooperate instead of compete. And I wonder if everything I believed was simply what I was taught to believe. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. The next trial is in 3 days. It will be the final trial. Only 3 contestants may survive it. Not groups, individuals. The God Emperor himself will attend, and he will want to see traditional rules followed. Meaning we will have to turn on each other. Meaning you will have to choose. Cooperation or survival. You cannot have both. After she left, Taemin sat in darkness and thought about choices, about what humanity had believed and what he had proven, about whether cooperation could survive when survival itself was at stake. Through the walls he heard Bora's voice and Minho's and Jiwon's. He heard friends he had made in hell, and he wondered if he had led them all to their deaths. The God Emperor arrived on the morning of the final trial, and his presence changed everything. The Colosseum, already massive beyond reason, seemed to grow smaller under his gaze. Even the air felt heavier, pressed down by the weight of 3,000 years of absolute rule. Isul was ancient beyond mortal comprehension, a Vethrak who had lived since the Empire's founding. His scales had darkened from gold to deep crimson, marked with scars from countless battles. Where Hyejin had 4 arms, he had 6, each one capable of crushing stone to powder. His eyes, vertical slits like all Vethrak, glowed with an inner light that suggested powers beyond physical strength. He settled onto a throne that rose from the Colosseum's center, elevated above even Hyejin's seat. The crowd of thousands fell silent in his presence. Even the bravest warriors felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. "Bring forth the contestants," Isul commanded, and his voice carried such authority that reality itself seemed to listen. 15 warriors emerged onto the platform. They had entered these trials as broken survivors from conquered species. Now they walked with purpose, standing together despite knowing what was coming. The platform had transformed one final time. Gone was the maze, the traps, the technological horrors. Now there was only an open circle of black stone, surrounded by walls too high to climb. Simple, direct, brutal. "The rules are clear," Isul said. "Only 3 may survive. The trial ends when 12 are dead or incapacitated beyond recovery. You may use any means necessary." His gaze swept across the warriors, lingering on Taemin. "There will be no cooperation, no mercy. You will remember what you are. Conquered species, fighting for the amusement of your betters." Silence answered him. The warriors looked at each other, and something unspoken passed between them. Isul smiled, showing fangs that had torn apart civilizations. "Begin." For a long moment, nobody moved. 15 warriors stood in a circle, weapons lowered, facing each other but not attacking. The crowd stirred, confused. This was not how trials proceeded. Then Taemin stepped forward, moving to the center of the platform. He looked up at the God Emperor, this being who had destroyed Earth, who had exterminated humanity, who represented everything the Empire had taken from him. "No," Taemin said. The single word echoed across the Colosseum like a thunderclap. Isol's glowing eyes focused on him. "What did you say?" "I said no. We will not fight each other. Not for your amusement. Not to prove your doctrine of strength and dominance. Not anymore." The crowd erupted in chaos. Some shouted in anger, others in disbelief. How dare a human, the weakest species, refuse the God Emperor himself? Isul rose from his throne, and the movement silenced every voice. "You refuse the trial?" "I refuse the Empire," Taemin replied. His voice was steady, despite knowing he was signing his death warrant. "Every species you conquered, you told them the same lie, that their defeat proved their inferiority, that cooperation was weakness, that survival meant accepting their place in your hierarchy. He gestured to the warriors around him. But these past weeks have proven something different. Together we are stronger than apart. Cooperation is not weakness. It is the foundation of every successful civilization. Your civilization is extinct because we lost a war, not because we were wrong. And even extinct, we are still here, still defiant, still refusing to accept that might makes right. Isul descended from his throne, each step deliberate and terrifying. He was 3 times Taemon's size, radiating power that bent light around him. You are correct about one thing, human. The Empire has survived for 3,000 years because we understand a fundamental truth. In the end, the strong survive and the weak perish. This is not cruelty. This is nature. Nature? Taemon laughed, sharp and bitter. You call yourself natural? You are a civilization, not a force of nature. And civilizations are built on choices, not inevitability. You chose conquest. You chose dominance. You chose to break every species you found rather than build something better. And that choice made us supreme. That choice made you tyrants. There is a difference. The God Emperor stared at him, and in those ancient eyes, Taemon saw something shift. Not anger, but curiosity. Very well. You wish to reject the trial? To refuse to fight? Then I offer you an alternative. He spread his 6 arms wide. By ancient law, any being may challenge the God Emperor directly for the throne. Single combat to the death. If you win, you claim the empire. If you lose, you die, and your companions will fight the trial as designed. Taemon, no! Bora's voice carried desperation. He has killed warriors who trained for centuries. You cannot win. She is right, Hyejin called from her throne, and her voice carried genuine concern. This is suicide. Accept the trial. Some of you will survive. But Taemon was not listening to them. He was thinking about Earth burning in the void, about every human who had died believing they had failed, about the weight in his head, the entire species reduced to electrical signals, waiting to be forgotten. He thought about Daehyun, who had learned honor from a human's mercy, about Bora, Minho, Jiwon, and Hyunwoo, who had learned cooperation in the Empire's own arena, about change starting with impossible choices. I accept, Taemon said, but I claim a right under my species' tradition. Before the duel I am allowed to speak, to make my case heard. Isul considered this. Very well. Speak, human. Tell us why we should care about the words of an extinct species. Taemon turned, not to face the God Emperor, but to face the crowd. Thousands of beings from dozens of species all watching, all waiting. I am not speaking to you, he said to Isul. I am speaking to them, to every conquered species in this Colosseum, to everyone watching across the Empire. His neural implant, activated fully, connecting to the Colosseum's broadcasting system, piggybacking on Minho's earlier hacks. His words would reach not just this arena but every world, every station, every ship in the Draktheron Empire. My name is Taemon. I am the last human. My species was not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most advanced. We were weak by the Empire's standards, and because of that weakness we were exterminated. Our worlds burned. Our people died. Our culture was erased. He paused, letting the weight of that truth settle. But before we died, we believed something. We believed that sentient beings deserved to choose their own fate. That cooperation was better than domination. That civilization meant lifting each other up, not pushing each other down. The crowd was silent now, listening despite themselves. For weeks I have fought in these trials, and I learned something the Empire does not want you to know. Every species here is capable of greatness. The Kelthros have honor. The Shikar have courage. The Quellan have genius. The Luminari have compassion. Every conquered species has gifts that could have enriched the galaxy, but the Empire taught you to bury those gifts. To compete instead of cooperate. To accept that your defeat made you inferior. It is not a lie, Isul interrupted. Your defeat proves nothing except that we were stronger. Stronger at killing, yes. But civilization is not built on killing. It is built on creation, on discovery, on the million small cooperations that let people build something bigger than themselves. Taemin looked directly at the God Emperor. You call yourself supreme, but what have you created? What art? What science? What beauty has your empire given the galaxy? You have conquered, yes, but you have built nothing except more efficient ways to break other people's spirits. Enough philosophy, Isul said, and now there was anger in his voice. You want to fight? Then let us begin. They cleared the platform. Taemin stood alone, against the God Emperor, armed with only his combat knife and the knowledge of a dead species. It was absurd, it was hopeless. And across the galaxy, species that had forgotten how to hope remembered why they had reached for the stars in the first place. The Empire was dead, but something new was being born from its ashes. Something better.